Hey all, Ron here from Military Images Magazine with a new episode of Life from the Civil War Research Trail. Literary references to Civil War cavalrymen as knights in shining armor abound. Many a wartime and post war writer turned to medieval nobility to describe the blue and gray troopers who fought from 1861 to 1865. Such depictions are intended to appeal to the romance of war and to honor the personal qualities of American citizen soldiers. This need to glorify, to uplift, to honor the soldier who has fallen in battle with the romantic descriptions that you would find from literature of that period is fairly commonplace. And such is the situation here with the profile that I want to share with you. It honors Captain William H. Scott of the 1st Ohio Cavalry. He lost his life during the Atlanta campaign in 1864. He was a son of Ireland, affectionately known to his comrades as Scotty. This profile comes from the regimental history, which is called 4 Years in the Saddle. And this profile is written by Captain John P. Ray, who was one of his peers. So here we go. The story of Captain William H. Scott, Scotty, the son of Ireland, by Captain Ray. Quote, one who by the unaided force of his own personality unconsciously commands the respect, confidence, and admiration of his associates, and while rapidly rising in rank and authority over them, awakens no jealousies, but fastens them to him with constantly strengthening bonds of friendship, shows the possession of the best elements of true nobility. Such a man was Captain William H. Scott of Company D. He fell in youth, but his short life grew a manhood as strong, rugged, gentle, symmetrical, and complete as ever awakened the hope of a country, inspired the confidence of a friend, or warmed the heart of home. No words can paint him here as he rides ever in the old picture painted by himself on the canvas of his comrade's memory. Not only among the men of his regiment is he remembered, but by all who ever met or knew him. 20 years after the war, I was addressing a soldiers' gathering in Minnesota when a voice called to me from the rear of the hall saying, "Tell us about Scotty, the ideal soldier of the old brigade." The voice, as I afterwards learned, came from a member of the 3rd Ohio Volunteer Cavalry. In July 1897, I spent a day in Calhoun, East Tennessee, where our regiment was stationed for some weeks in the winter of 1863 to 1864. I found the old residence full of reminiscence and praise of Lieutenant Scott before he was a captain. They only knew of him for a few weeks, a third of a century before, as an officer in wartime, enforcing military rule in their midst. Their fresh and kindly remembrance is a better monument than stone or bronze. His soldier record is told in the regimental history. It may be epitomized thus: an unknown, friendless Irish boy, a private soldier, sergeant major, lieutenant, adjutant, captain, staff officer, the trusted friend and subaltern of Milliken, Cup, and Long. It's the senior officers of the regiments. Every rank attained and every confidence secured by demonstrated merit. To say that he was brave in battle is to accord him only the just tribute due every manly man who goes into battle. Gentle by nature, tender of heart, without the slightest suggestion of braggadocio, careful of his men, alert to every contingency of danger, of which personally he never seemed conscious. He reveled in the storm when it broke and rode the fiery front of battle, a veritable prince of war. He rose with so little friction from the ranks and breasted every duty and occasion with such ease that those who knew him best felt that they had never fathomed his full capacity of daring and doing. He had decision without arrogance, and in places of peril seemed instinctively to know what to do and where to strike. He had all the enthusiasm of a knight of old, combined with the reckless daring of the typical American cavalryman. Those who saw him ride like a centaur upon the enemy's lines at Stone's River and saw him in his last fight on foot with his shattered right arm dangling by his side, waving his saber in his left hand as he charged through Wheeler's lines at Lovejoy Station, know that ever and always he was the same dashing, undaunted, unconquerable soldier. He was a strict disciplinarian, but not a martinet. His men always spoke affectionately of him as Scotty, but there was a quiet, unpretentious air about him that forbade familiarity. His dignity was not the kind that had to assert itself. It was native and to the manner born. It commanded instinctive respect. His men loved him and never feared to follow where he led, and he always led if the enemy were in front. He belonged to the fated ones who, while eagerly seeking, not infrequently emerged from glorious battle covered with wounds. In that heroic charge of the regiment at Stone's River, riding by the side of the chivalric Milliken, he received a terrible wound in the groin. A moment after, as he lay in blood, he saw his colonel and best friend fall a few feet away, while at the same time knowing that his old captain, who first of all had recognized his worth, was dead on the same field. It was months before he was fit for duty, but he was in the saddle when the order came to advance in the summer of 1863, and though saddened by loss of his friends, he was buoyant and brilliant as ever. He rode heroically through the campaigns of that and the succeeding year, making a record full of dash and enterprise, dazzling with valor and ending without a stain. Shot through the right shoulder and knocked from his horse in Kilpatrick's charge at Lovejoy Station in August 1864, he rose to his feet and, waving his sword in his left hand, followed the charging column through the enemy's lines. For 75 miles, he rode uncomplainingly over rough roads under a broiling August sun in an ambulance, all the weary way, though in intense pain, cheering his wounded companions. The morning after reaching our camp with the lines, I was awakened by Surgeon Cannon and asked to go to him to see Scotty. On the way, he told me that Scott's life could only be saved by amputating his right arm, which he refused to permit. When I reached his ambulance, he welcomed me with a smile and cheerful words. I sat by his side in the ambulance and talked for an hour. He then told me the story of his short but uneventful life. I urged him to let the surgeon have his way. Scotty answered, "No. To amputate my arm, it must be dislocated at the shoulder. That will leave me maimed and disfigured. I can die, but I cannot fight the battle of life alone without my good right arm. I have no mother, no wife, no relative in America. Except my comrades, there are none to mourn my death. I want to live, but will not purchase life at such a cost." No persuasion could induce him to consent to the operation, and after lingering some weeks, he died. An incident occurred while I was talking with him that morning that lies a precious pearl on the beaten shore of memory. A noble boy of my own company was lying mortally wounded in the next ambulance. He was moaning in great pain. The surgeon came up and was getting ready to dress his wound when Scott heard the moans from the next ambulance. He raised his head and, with an air of command and unselfish heroism equaling that which made the dying Sidney immortal, said, "Doctor, don't you hear poor Steve Barton? Never mind me. Let me alone and go and relieve the suffering of that brave dying boy." In the center of one of the circles of dead in the National Cemetery at Chattanooga, on a slope looking out toward the east and catching the first rays of the morning sun as it rises above the hallowed heights of Missionary Ridge, there is a little mound with a little headstone marked Captain William H. Scott, 1st Ohio Cavalry. No kindred have ever visited it. No woman's tears have ever moistened it. But under that mound lies one whose life was as clean, whose brain was as clear, whose heart was as true and loyal, whose soul was as chivalric and unselfish as the story of any land or age can furnish. So There you have it. The story, the knightly story of Captain William H. Scott of the 1st Ohio Cavalry. Thanks for listening. We'll see you on the next episode of Life on the Civil War Research Trail.